Okay, so hi, welcome to our press conference. I'm Lexa Gamo. I'm a youth leader at Rise for Youth. I'm 17 years old. I'm a rising senior at Richmond Community High School. I have organized and led town halls in the city of Richmond and at the Virginia General Assembly, and I have lobbied for legislation that would protect Black students and students of color across Virginia, and I contribute to reforming Virginia's educational system by increasing the focus on mental health as well as other things. So let's start us off. I want to thank everyone for joining the press conference, which is hosted by the Virginia Coalition for Transforming Police in tandem with youth leaders in Rise for Youth, as well as Abo Unity and Us for Us. In a few minutes, you'll begin to hear from Delegate Corey and youth leaders across Virginia. Following the press conference is a press packet, including a current list of of coalition member organizations and a list of speakers, and some statements that you'll hear from speakers today. Feel free to reach out to Evelyn Ford after the press conference if you'd like to interview with any of the speakers or members of the coalition. She will put you in touch with them. And if you have any questions during the press conference, please type them in the chat box at any point. We will be getting to your questions at the end. So without further ado, let me introduce Delegate Corey. Since 2010, she has served in the Virginia House of Delegates, representing the 38th District in Fairfax County. She is the chair of cities, counties, and towns. She is on finance and public safety in labor and commerce in the labor and commerce community. She is also on the NCOIL Governor's School Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Work Group, Autism Advisory Council, Disability Commission, School Readiness Commission, BDOC Study on Staffing Levels, Conditions, and Employment Compensation. And Delegate Corey is passionate and an advocate for many issues, particularly criminal justice reform. So without further ado, here's Delegate Corey.
Thank you. Thank you for that very detailed introduction. I do appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and to all those who are watching and listening. I need to thank everybody on this panel for all of your activism, your continuing advocacy, and to say, please don't stop. While I am working as hard as I can on many different criminal justice issues, particularly SROs, school resource officers, which I'm going to talk about in a second, any legislation I put in isn't going to go anywhere without public support. And I need you, we need to work together to get this, to see this happen. One thing that's not on my bio is that I was on the school board for 10 years in Fairfax County before I became a delegate. And that, combined with being a parent and living in the district in which I represent, which is the most diverse district in the Commonwealth in terms of every possible measurement that you could come up with. And so fortunately for me, my children all went to a high school that actually was recognized by National Geographic for being so diverse. And that high school taught me a lot. One thing that it taught me is that the school resource officer program, while well-intentioned, has been going on for a very long time without any serious observation or evaluation. And like a lot of programs that take on a life of their own, I think it has morphed into a program that's very different than it was designed to be. And it's actually become negative for many students in many high schools. And I know you all have seen the data from Fairfax County Juvenile Court about the number of students who are put into the criminal justice system by SROs and the amazing percentages of students who are minorities, students who are low income, students who are not white, students who do not speak English as a first language that are put in that school to prison pipeline. Once you see the numbers, there's no choice that we have to stop the program temporarily and evaluate it seriously, decide locality by locality, perhaps, what we need and what we want. I am not saying that any of the police officers who have been school resource officers are bad actors. They're not. I think honestly, and as a former school board member, I can say this, I think the school administrators across the county have gotten, and the Commonwealth, gotten a little lazy in their discipline actions. And it's real easy to call on an armed, uniformed police officer to come over here and help me with this rowdy student, rather than taking it on yourself and going through the process that each school board has set up for discipline actions that has nothing to do with criminality or the courts. So you may know that a while ago with Sean Perryman, the president of NAACP, we wrote a letter to the governor and asking that in the current budget, the money that's allocated for school resource officers, which is 4.7 million a year, be reallocated for school mental health counselors. And because a mental health counselor's salary averages about $50,000 a year, you can see that this money could make a big difference in a lot of school systems. So I have filed what's called a budget amendment, 2 of them actually, for the budget we are now reevaluating in the special session. One is to remove the money from the Department of Homeland Security, and the other is to put it under the Department of Education for grants for new mental health positions in school systems. It's very simple. It's turned out to be more controversial than I probably realized. But again, the goal of this is to protect children, to stand back, take a break, look at what we're doing. And I need to remind everyone, so please, if you're listening, share this information. School resource officers are not hired by the school system. They are hired by the police department. They are policemen. If the state reallocates the money temporarily or permanently, we are not creating unemployment. We are shifting the responsibilities of the policemen who have been SROs back to the police department to be deployed as they will. And I think this is absolutely the perfect time. Being in the COVID-19 crisis, schools have not been physically in session for quite a while, and many of them will not be for a number of months, which plain speaking means SROs have not had anything to do. They're not walking around empty school buildings or empty school grounds. So it's, again, seems to me the perfect time to stand back and say, what do we want? Is this what we want? And finally, mental health. Our students have been through so much in their regular lives as well as in the crisis we're in now, that I think they need all the support they can get for eventually reintegrating into the public school system. I also think I'm probably talking too long. Forgive me. I am passionate about this. Therefore, I need all your support. Get in touch with every delegate, every senator, and say, hey, the budget item, the budget amendment about moving the SRO money to mental health counselors is where you have to put your vote. Thanks a lot, everyone.
All right, thank you so much, Delegate Corey, for helping support the youth and all the work you do. So next we're gonna have,
wait a minute, I didn't thank you, I'm sorry. I didn't thank you for that wonderful letter, which was totally unsolicited and such an important piece of support to receive. So I hope you're going to talk about it. Okay, please, the letter for the students. Thank you.
Okay, so next we have Kalia Jones. She is a multi-talented 17-year-old freshman at Clark Atlanta University, a psychology major, the vice president of Abu Unity, a passionate activist for social justice reform in the Central Virginia area. During our last youth-led conference, she answered the question, how can we as Virginians support removing SROs out of schools? Her response garnered the support of over 500 constituents across the state. So give it up for Kalia.
Thank you so much, Lux, for that very, very detailed introduction. And thank you guys so much for having me. I just wanted to say first, I'm from Eastern Virginia, the Newport News area, and I would like to thank Delegate Corey for her work and her time for putting forth this legislation. This legislation is imperative, and I thank you so much for taking the initiative and reallocating the funds into something that is more restorative, to something that is more proactive, to something that can really heal the students and create a generation of future leaders, of future delegates, of future activists, and a future that is bright and that we want to live in. So I thank you so much for your support and everything that you are doing with this budget amendment. This $4.7 million being reallocated is something that we really need to see in Virginia, and it's something that can really catalyze a shift in our Commonwealth. You brought up a really great point, and you said legislation goes nowhere without public support. You have my support. As you see, I am an advocate for school resource officers, and I have personally had experience with school resource officers in my high school. So I definitely support you, but I want to give a formal endorsement from us as youth and from us as a coalition. We fully support your budget amendment. We fully support the removal of $4.7 million from Homeland Security and reallocating it to the education system for it to be used for mental health services and for it to be used for counselors. There's always this talk about how there is no money for clinicians, how there is no money for counselors, and you have taken the initiative to find the monies and place them in a space where they are truly needed. So we thank you so much, and you have our endorsement as a coalition. And with that, I pass it back to our wonderful moderator, Lux, so she can introduce our next speaker.
All right, so next we have Victor Clark. He is a doctoral student in social behavior science in the program out of the School of Medicine at VCU. As a part of his graduate research assistantship under the direction of Dr. Kelly Carlisle, he engages in research in VCU's I-Cubed core, distributing criminalization in education. His research is predominantly in HIV, the intersections of psychopathology and health outcomes, and health disparities experienced by racial, gender, and sexual minorities. Victor believes in a world where youth are given an equal opportunity to develop and thrive and to reach the fullest and brightest potential, and to engage in an impactful change for the future. So come on, Victor.
Thank you, Lux. That was great. Thank you very much. So I'm here predominantly to give an overview of the statistics that are so essential in this legislation. So our title of this movement is called the $4.7 million redirected towards wellness. So our first statistic that's really essential to talk about is that schools with police have 3.5 times the arrest record as schools without police. Now, as Delegate Corey had indicated earlier, that this doesn't necessarily mean that these offenses are occurring more often in schools with police, but that there is a larger percentage of youth that are being arrested for different offenses because of various reasons that maybe administration doesn't want to take into account the fact that they're responsible or handling these resolutions in an effective way, so they contact police to make arrests. We also know that over 96% of the serious offenses reported in the new data in 2018 do not involve weapons. We also know that Black students were arrested 3 times more than white students. Pacific Islanders, Native Hawaiians, and Native American students were arrested 2 times more than white students. Latinx students were arrested 1.3 times more than white students. And Black girls that make up nationally 16% of the female student population accounted for 39% of all girls arrested in schools, which tells us that there is a huge racial minority population being arrested currently. Okay. So that I want to introduce to you Kalia again from Abu University, the Abu University's vice president, and Kalia will speak with you.
Thank you, Victor, for those statistics. I do appreciate them. A lot of the times, sometimes our stories seem like they're not enough. So to have statistics to back up the stories that we tell continuously to get our point across and to get legislation through was very helpful. I appreciate you for taking the time to find those numbers and to highlight those disparities. Like was said before, the school resource officer, even though it was meant the school resource officer program, even though it was meant to be beneficial, and even though it was meant to help and create a safer school and learning environment, kind of turned into something that was the opposite. As we all know, in the last couple of days or so, we lost the actor Chadwick Boseman, and something that was revealed through his passing was that you never really know what people are going through. He was battling colon cancer while giving us some of the best works of Black media, and we were unbeknownst to that. And the same thing can be applied to students within schools. You never know what students are going through. Sometimes you can wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Sometimes you can have moments where you aren't feeling yourself, and those can be reflective in your behavior. Sometimes you have your headphones on, you have your hoodie on, and you don't want to take it off because you don't want to be seen in a state of distress, in a state of anguish, in a state of anxiety. But that goes against school policy, that goes against dress code, that goes against what schools have in place for proper learning. So oftentimes, instead of being pulled aside to be asked what's wrong, being pulled aside to discover why you're acting in such a way, most students are referred to, especially in schools with heavy presences of SROs, are referred to security officers or school resource officers. And something that turned from a mental state, something that turned from feeling bad or feeling anxiety or feeling anguish is now into a space of criminality. So now if you snatch away from an officer, if you bump an officer, these things are now assaults against an officer. If you get into a fight, you're getting charged with assault instead of getting suspended or in-school suspension and things of that nature. So schools with police officers having 3.5 times more arrests as schools without police officers makes complete sense, because if you are being dealt with by law enforcement, everything that you're doing is now going to be criminal instead of just infringing upon student handbook policies. So with that, the legislation that Delegate Corey, the budget amendment that Delegate Corey has put forth is so imperative, is so integral, because so many times mental health crises are deemed criminal, and it gives youth a more, it's the adultification of youth of color, basically. It takes the youth away from the youth. They don't have the chance to be naive. They don't have the chance to be ignorant. They don't have the chance to make mistakes. They don't have the chance to have a bad day. Everything that they do that isn't all put together, that isn't all figured out, is now deemed criminal. And somewhere that's supposed to be a safe haven and somewhere that's supposed to be a place of learning and a place of comfort is now flooded with officers, is now flooded with criminals. So as we said before, I offer my support to Delegate Corey, and I appreciate everything that she has done. And with that, I pass it back over to Lux so she can introduce our next speaker.
So yeah, as you can see, Victor has created some great one-pagers and facts so we can see them visually as our people are speaking on them. So he's just sharing that screen right now. So our next speaker is Chynna Hodges. Chynna Hodges is the Us for Us Director of Youth Services. She is 22 years old and a sophomore at Thomas Nelson Community College and majoring in criminal justice. She has spoken on redirecting funds and has delivered solutions to improving methods for education.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for being here and taking your time to come and hear what we have to say. I feel like the needs of kids and their families have just been put on the back burner for way too long. In the handbooks from school, it says that you want to make sure that students are safe and protected, yet 62% of our schools have sworn in police officers. But you ignore the 24% of schools who have no psychologists, no grief counselors, no nurses. And for a lot of Black kids, if not all, police are the last people that we feel protected and safe around. And we know and understand that all cops are not bad cops. However, as y'all say, you fit the description, and we can't just, I feel like when I went through 2 periods of my life, when I had to deal with mental illness in Hampton City schools, which both times of my mental illness was different. My first time I was entering 9th grade, and I had a traumatizing experience. And my mental illness the first time around was very upset. I was angry, depressed, and didn't want to listen. And for that, I was put out of classes, put in SIPs, into suspension, or just suspended. And not once did anybody ask what was the problem, what was going on, what could we do to fix those things. My second time, I was in my senior year. My brother was killed. This time around, I was depressed again, withdrawn. I was more into a shell. My grades dropped. I was missing school. At this point, I was just surviving. I wasn't living. This time around, I did have a person who was my guidance counselor. She jumped through hoops, went beyond her duties of handling what she needed to handle for me, plus 200 other students. And every day I do thank her and thank God for having her there for me. However, those resources and grief counselors and things should have been available not only for me, but for her. So she wouldn't have been overwhelmed in her job, plus what she was doing for me. And like, she did everything that she could, but I was still hit with truancy. I was still put on a temporary detain order, which is where you get into handcuffs and you get took into the mental home. That's basically like jail in the same. And I feel like 81% of Virginia has already told you and keep telling you that we want and we need resources for our mental illness, for our kids, their families. And honestly, it's just way past time for you guys to have these resources. It's time for us to defund the police and fund the wellness for our communities and our future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, China. We also want to emphasize that within the Commonwealth, the Wilder School, we sent off a Commonwealth poll data of 818 participants, and 81% of those participants believed that public schools should see providing mental health services for students as part of their mission. The next statistics we want to really preface are the ones that introduce the fact that the Virginia state has a huge kind of disparity against the nation in suspensions and in the times that students are actually outside of the schools and lost. So 4,000 students were suspended in the state of Virginia across 1 year, almost 2 times the national average. And a combined 16,200 days were lost among Black, Native American, Pacific Islanders, and Latino students in Virginia across 1 year, compared to 14,400 days lost on a national scale for the same combined rates of students in 1 year. So with that, I would like to introduce to you Destiny. Destiny is 21 years old, a senior at Norfolk State University. a political science major and a social justice activist here in Virginia, working as a youth leader and activist with Abu Unity.
Hello, thanks for having me. Good afternoon, everybody. So I want to discuss basically about the statistic he just mentioned to us. What I want to say is basically the time is now. The need for action is now. The accountability from our legislators is now. We are double the national average. That's not good, you know, as a state. So I just wanted to say that we as youth need to hold our legislators accountable, and legislators need to make sure that they are being considerate of what youth have to say. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
And one of the biggest statistics that I know speaks volumes is money. And so we want to highlight the fact that Virginia spends $258,000 to lock up a child in a juvenile prison for a single year. There's also continuous disparity in who is being incarcerated. So youth of color only make up about 43% of the intake population, yet account for over 70% of commitments into the child prison system. And with that, I want to introduce Jameer Starks. He's an 18-year-old freshman at Howard University. He's a legal communications major and an Abu Unity youth activist in the Central Virginia area. Prior to this press conference, he has spoken in the past on the forced power dynamic of law enforcement in communities of color across Virginia and how children in Virginia are being inflicted with anxieties from over-policing.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. And I would just like to touch on the fact that it costs roughly $250,000 to house a child in the Bon Air juvenile prison and it costs around the same thing for a juvenile prison across the Commonwealth. And that money could be used on that individual child as a personal social worker, which is what we're trying to get into a little bit with the budget amendment, who can ensure that that child's needs are met. Instead, the money goes to the continued incarceration and criminalization of our young people who are disproportionately children of color. The fact that it is easier for our Commonwealth to institutionalize a child instead of providing them with ample enough resources to have a fulfilling childhood is not only disgusting, but also indicative of the lengths our society will go to undermine the existences of people of color. And I really was shaken up by China and Destiny stories, because you could see that that money could have been somewhere else so that Destiny didn't have to feel like she was alone for so long. And the fact that she had to go to a guidance counselor who was already overworked, and that guidance counselor had to go beyond her job, it shows that there is an issue. And if we really want to address the issues of policing, of anxieties, of the psychological effects of being a child of color in this country, then it starts with addressing the mental aspects of it and making sure that our daily needs are met so that we don't have to focus on barely surviving, and then we can actually focus on our lives. And that's really what I wanted to say. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And finally, one of our last statistics is kind of this wrap up of why are we trying to redirect funds to mental health services. So 1 in 10 children have experienced 3 or more traumatic events. Exposure to traumatic experiences directly inhibits multiple areas of the brain from properly developing, including the nucleus accumbens, which is the pleasure and reward system directly associated with substance dependence, the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain associated with impulse control and executive functioning, and the amygdala, the brain's fear response system. So we also know that 97% of incarcerated young people have been found to have experienced at least one traumatic experience. And we know mental health services can be indicative of a better future. So with that, I would like to introduce Ayana. Ayana is a Rise for Youth leader that has taken part in town halls to voice her concerns on SROs and mental health in education.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ayana. So I would just like to say, imagine you're a child and you're at a school, you get in trouble, but it's not like elementary school anymore. You're going into a higher grade, and it seems like as older as you get in the school system, the more policing there is. And I just don't understand why you bring someone that you have trained to take down criminals and murderers to a school with children. I honestly don't see the connection, why they're even there. I feel like they're there just to be there, just to give them something to do, and apparently they get paid overtime for this when they're not even doing anything. I don't think it's right. I feel like a school security guard is enough, somebody without a weapon or a gun. I feel like there should be more mental health workers in the school, because somebody else said, everybody's not always having a good day when they come to school. School isn't the funnest place to be for everyone. And you got somebody with a gun and a badge and a taser in your face because you have on a hood. I honestly feel like it's too much, and it should have never been done in the first place. Like I said, those are people who are trained to take down criminals, and you have them somewhere with children. It just hurts my soul to see this, honestly. And imagine you're a kid and you just got in a fight. You think like somebody regular is gonna break up, like a teacher, but no, you're getting manhandled by a police officer because they were trained to take down criminals. So now they're over here manhandling children, like they're in prison or something. And I honestly find it very disgusting, in my opinion, to have a grown man who is trained to take down a criminal with weapons on him breaking up a child fight. You never know what can happen if that grown man decides that the child's not a child anymore and that he's a criminal. That child could get injured or hurt. And that is all I have to say.
Thank you. Now I'd like to return to our great moderator, Lux Akamo. Give me 1 second to turn off my screen. I apologize.
All right. Hey, so we have this open letter that Delegate Corey was talking about at the beginning of the press conference. So I'm going to read this. Bear with me. There's a lot to be said, but the message needs to be said, and this is why we're here today. So, dear Governor Northam, we are Black, Brown, LGBTQ, differently abled, and other marginalized youth of Virginia standing together and fighting for justice and equity in schools. We are writing to ask for your support for the budget amendment submitted by Delegate Kay Corey that acknowledges the importance of addressing the issue of school resource officers, SROs, in Virginia schools by removing all state funding from supporting SRO programs in Virginia public schools. As you know, State 599 funds are allocated to every jurisdiction for policing support, and the legislature is currently working those funds. Is tied to ensuring each department adherence to the newly developed standardized training requirements, accountability measures, and the appropriate scaling back of the scope of work of police departments are tasked with doing. As you also know, school divisions in Virginia also receive state dollars to help fund their SRO programs. We are asking you to support us through endorsement of Delegate Corey's budget amendment, removing state dollars from funding SRO programs. Instead, we believe Virginia State's school safety dollars should only be accessible by school divisions to create alternative support mechanisms in schools, such as credible messengers, mentors, and classroom aid programs, increasing the number of counselors, psychologists, and other support staff and other alternatives to SROs. Every school in Virginia deserves to be fully funded and staffed, all needed support to end the reliance on police departments for supporting children in public school. Virginia schools must employ staff who are well equipped to work alongside students in need of therapeutic intervention, guidance, vocational training, mentorship, and yes, even discipline. The removal of police and increasing support staff within Virginia schools will allow a paradigm shift in the way we address the educational and support needs of our youth in public schools. This paradigm shift is monumentally important because we know there is a difference in school divisions and the treatment of youth within them across the Commonwealth based on the communities these young people live in. To many of our youth, our young people living in these communities face economic, recreational, and employment opportunity deprivation. As we know, that the communities facing these devastating challenges are overwhelmingly Black, Brown, and other ethnic populations. These communities have created cultures that seek to obtain what every Virginian should have and access to only by alternative means. But these environments are producing toxic stress in us, the children and young people arriving to school every day in fight or flight mode. Many young people from resource deprived communities have very little to no access to proper support and behaviors that are criminalized rather than recognized as cries for help. To help put this into perspective, consider that Black youth ages 15 to 17 only make up 21% of Virginia's population, but there are 57% of students suspended, 49% of students referred to the justice system in schools, 42% of youth referred to court services and units, and 68% incarcerated in the Virginia's juvenile prisons. These numbers are even higher when we overlay the statistics of children who are differently abled or a part of the LGBTQ community. These stark and troubling statistics tell a devastating story that in Virginia, we are significantly more committed to harshly punishing Black and other marginalized youth than we are providing educational opportunities for them. This must change. And the first step towards making this paradigm shift is moving away from schools and policing and into school funding to support every student. We need to realize our own American dreams. We must stop missing opportunities to identify when students are exhibiting symptoms of trauma versus unacceptable behavior. We must employ ways to support and correct youth in both instances that do not lead to school pushout, arrests, or incarceration. Virginia's educators, administrators, and school support staff must become gatekeepers of success rather than gatekeepers of the school to prison pipeline. For children in every zip code in the community, we must invest in support staff in schools that are professionally trained in conflict resolution and not police officers. We must ensure support staff can relate to and are reflective of young people and communities they serve by the way of credible messengers. Now it's time to dissolve Virginia's school divisions, reliance on police departments who are in support. These partnerships have proven to enhance the likelihood of Black, Brown, and differently abled LGBTQ youth becoming entangled in Virginia's juvenile justice system. We are asking for you to support Delegate Corey's budget amendment to stop state funds and stop SRO programs. And during the 2021 General Assembly session, we are asking that you support redirecting state money previously used to help fund SRO programs and other resources to instead be used to increase the number of types of support staff in Virginia schools with targeted focus on schools serving communities suffering great deprivations. Please support us, Virginia's youngest constituents, by supporting the budget amendment drafted by Delegate Kay Corey, ending the funding of SRO programs in schools and the commitment to addressing the issue further during the 2021 General Assembly session. It is time to demonstrate to the youth, families, and educators in the Virginia public system how much you, the highest elected official, truly care through the actions you are willing to ensure their success. The future of our next generation depends on the investment you're willing to make now. Thank you for your consideration. Signed, the youth leaders of Rise for Youth, ABBA Unity Foundation, Us for Us, and We Are. So I know that was, thank you, Delegate Corey. I know that was like really long, a mouthful, but basically I feel like it was really just summed up in what our youth said today on this panel, and the numbers that Victor put forward. You know, there's definitely a problem that we see in the state, definitely the over punishment of our Black and brown youth, and us, our youth, are definitely tired of it. And school is somewhere where we're supposed to feel safe, and you know, the removal of SROs will definitely, you know, make us feel safe in school. So with that being said, I want to thank all of the youth that talked today. All of you guys did great, gave great personal stories, and just really drove the message home, what we all were thinking and wanted to say. I wanted to thank the people who put this together. I'll say the groups again: Rise for Youth, ABBA Unity, Us for Us, We Are, and everybody who's listening and watching in support of us as well. You know, I hope you take our message and you support what we're talking about. You really listen and help us, you know, drive the movement on. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to pass it on to Miss Valerie. Oh, as well, thank you, press, for helping share our message. So I'm going to pass it on to Miss Valerie, who will help us answer any questions that you have in the chat.
Thank you, Lux. Great job, all of you young leaders. I am just overwhelmed by the sharing of your stories. Delegate Corey, thank you so much for championing these budget amendments. And we have a question from Henry Haggard. And the question is, how will counselor funding be distributed among Virginia schools?
Okay.
You're muted, Delegate Corey.
Okay, yes. It's a grant program. School systems have to apply to the Department of Education and show that they are creating additional mental health counselor positions in their schools. And there are guidelines that the Department of Education is developing right now. Okay.
Thank you for that, Delegate Corey. Yeah, it's really important to understand that while every school division, they have the opportunity to develop as they will programming, the idea that this is a grant fund that they are going to be able to draw down from, that's really important, because we recognize that some school divisions are more challenged than others. And if this was just a blanket allocation around the state, we could potentially end up with some of those same deprivations being perpetuated. But the idea that this is a grant fund opportunity, it means that those school divisions that perhaps don't need the funds can leave that money there for those school divisions that potentially may need to draw down for 2 positions or 3 positions. And so I'm just really grateful for the thoughtfulness behind using a grant system rather than an even distribution. I would like to open it up for other questions if there are any. Let's see here. I don't see any other questions, but I'd like to give just a couple of more minutes for any to come in that might. I'm going to take a moment to jump over to Facebook Live so I can see if any questions came in over there. You know, I don't see any, so I'm just going to take this opportunity to just say thank you to each of you. Thank you to each of you young leaders, because this is the third time that you have now come together to speak out on issues of importance to you. The first time you just came to just kind of lay it all out. Thank you for that. And then you came together to announce the beginning of session and say that, you know what, you legislators, listen to us, move on what you have heard from us. Don't take our social capital, don't take our words, don't take our pain and exploit it and say we've listened. Do something about it. You've been placed into these seats in order to do what needs to be done, in order to respect and move in the right direction for every Virginian. And so now I'm so excited that today, Delegate Corey, you have proven that you didn't just hear, but you listened and you were willing to take action. So I also just, let's see, I did get one more message here. It says, we came together as young people were disappointed that SROs weren't addressed. Does this mean that it will now be addressed for special session? So actually, so the question is whether or not SROs are being addressed during special session. These budget amendments, they are beginning the conversation. That's what I will say. Delegate Corey, please jump in if you'd like. And you're still on mute.
You're right. Nope, wrong.
Okay. You're still muted. Delegate, you're muted. If you just hit your space bar. There you go.
Hello, got it. Okay. Yes, this is just the beginning. If we are successful in shifting this money, that's a wonderful, wonderful win. But it's not enough. And there's a lot more that we should do. And if we are not successful in reallocating this money, then there are many more things that we need to work on in the 2021 session. I put in 2 bills this session, this special session, that won't be heard, but they're on the record. And one is that SROs should not be involved in student discipline. And the other is that SROs should have special training to deal with students with who are differently abled. I think that, again, that's just scratching the surface of what we need. And I would hope that all of you would stay with me and push me in the right direction for January 2021. We are limited. We're only allowed, I think, 13 bills. So I need 13 good bills from you all for next January, and thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Corey. And so, yeah, we're just at the beginning here, but that's okay. These are all young voters here. These are young people, and all but one are voting age, so or are getting right up on voting age. And so to not listen to these young people means that you are alienating your own constituents. So it's time to listen to these young voices, recognize that they have something to say and that they are going to be holding you accountable. While Delegate Corey has already stepped up to the plate, there are so many more that need to do so. And they're watching, they're listening. And I am so grateful to be a part of helping them foster and grow on into the amazing advocates that they are, supporting what it is that they are pushing. And we would like to just thank you all. Thank you to the press that has come out or who has tuned in. Thank you to all of you who have tuned in via Facebook Live or by signing into this Zoom. And I am going to turn it back to Lux now to take us home.
All right, yeah, so again, big thank you to all the youth leaders, speakers that were on this today. You know, big thank you to everybody who was hearing us. I feel like I'm just re-saying whatever Ms. Valerie said. Big thank you to Victor for putting all those numbers together and helping, you know, paint a greater picture of what we're facing. And big thank you to Delegate Corey.
Can I say something? Oh, I'm sorry for interrupting, but very quickly, maybe, I hope anyway, you've noticed the picture back here. This is Bijan Gazar, who was shot by Park Police in the head, sitting in his car after he had been pulled over. Of course, he's dead, and the Park Police have yet to do anything about it. And I am positive that because he was brown, that was a major reason why. They didn't even let him get out of the car. They shot him several times in the head. His family and mine have been close for years before Bijan was born. So this is a cause for me. And I hope all of you says, we are Bijan. So I hope all of you will follow this case and let's get the facts out there. It's ridiculous. The park police are hiding. We can't have that. So thank you for letting me interrupt.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Delegate Corey. I think that all of us here are definitely bringing our personal stories, or just being Black, a youth, a brown youth, or just a person of color in America, definitely have a connection to just what's going on as well, you know, just with policing in America in general. And us as students just have a specific connection to SROs because, again, school is something that we go to almost every day, and we still face it not only in our communities where they're killing our people, but in schools where they're sending our peers off into the prison, school to prison pipeline. So thank you, Delegate Corey, for helping advocate for us. And thank you for everybody who's listening. And to anybody who feels the same way, definitely speak your mind, support other youth that are out there spreading this message. And yeah, that's pretty much it.